Which Side Podcast is a proud member of the Which Side Media Collective.
This week's episode is sponsored by ProtectMyPooch.com.
Yeah, you might have heard us talking about ProtectMyPooch.com. It's super awesome. The signs are only $6.99.
It's just a no trespassing sign that says, hey, I don't want you trespassing. If you're law enforcement, I don't consent to you searching my property, but I have a dog on premises. So call animal control if you're going to be a dick.
Yeah, so totally check them out. ProtectMyPooch.com. Get a sign, let them know that.
Yeah, let them know that you heard it from us. Side. This is episode 91.
Is it 91?
Yeah.
Yeah, we have Chris Green from Animal Legal Defense Fund, as well as the new documentary that's coming out of Dogs and Men.
Yeah, they just changed their name. It used to be Puppycide. They did the Kickstarter under Puppycide, but they have a new name change. We talk about that in the episode, so stick around, listen to all that. They're the group, ALDF is the group that's fighting the Ag-Gag Laws. So specifically here in the state of Utah and other places like Idaho and wherever Alec and their cronies are trying to push them. You have any news and events going on this week, Jordan?
Yeah, tomorrow in California, in Oakland, they're doing a fundraiser party for the Utah Tar Sands 21 people that were arrested at the tar sands mine here. Also, there's a letter writing on Tuesday in New York with the ABC. On Thursday here, there is a hearing for the Utah Ag-Gag, which we talk about a little bit on here. And on Saturday in Utah, there is also the Fight or Flight Tour, which is put on by the Bunny Alliance and Civil Liberty Defense, as well as Resistance Ecology. And they are fighting Delta for trying to get them to stop transporting bunnies
for vivisection purposes. Yeah. It's an awesome campaign. Definitely, if you can support that, get out there and do it.
News-wise, though, they recently... We talk about the Justice for Geist thing.
Yeah.
Recently, he was just acquitted.
Yeah, so there was like an independent board that said pretty much he didn't do anything wrong, which in my mind says the independent board wasn't very independent and definitely did not follow the will of the vast majority of people living in that community.
Yeah,
which is your neighborhood, basically. Yeah.
It's disgusting. It really is.
Throwing it back to our sponsor this week. Hey, kick it back, get a Protect My Pooch sign, and, hopefully that'll save, a dog's life. Maybe it'll make that cop stop and think. We talk about this as in the episode is the biggest deterrent is training. Maybe that will stop, the police officer and say, hey, maybe I shouldn't be so quick to pull a gun and shoot something that might end up killing it and or missing and killing a child and or a million other things.
So if you have any events or news that you'd like to send to us, you can shoot us an email or check out the local events listed on our whichsidepodcast.com page.
Yeah, if we don't have a calendar events for your area, let us know. We'll put one together for you, or try at least. The slingshot this week, August 6th, 1945. The U.S. drops the atomic bomb on Hiroshima, killing 130,000 people.
That's a lot.
And on the 9th, they dropped the atomic bomb on Nagasaki, killing another 73,000 people.
It's really unfathomable just how many people were killed.
What's even blows my mind away even more is when you find out how many were killed and how much of the cities were destroyed due to the firebombing that led up to it.
And that's not even going to the people who were injured and...
No.
And...
That's not even counting the long-term effects, the long-term... No, it's...
All of that nuclear shit in the air.
It's fucking disgusting. I have no other words for that. But hey, I really hope you guys enjoy this episode.
I'm Jordan.
Cool. This is Chris.
And I'm Jeremy, by the way.
Hey, Jeremy.
How you doing today?
I'm doing good. Enjoying my kind of first free day in many a moon. Yeah, it's been a little fast and furious with the legislatures winding down, and I've got to get a lot of balls in the air. So it's nice to take a bit of a break.
And you have to spend your break with us. That sucks.
No, it's fine. It sounds like a pretty casual vibe there. So yeah, it's perfect for a nice Sunday afternoon.
Oh,
Good.
perfect. So, what balls do you have in the air?
So yesterday I did a bill signing with Governor Quinn of Illinois. He signed some anti-puppy mill legislation that would increase fines and fees and just try to make life a little bit more difficult for them. And also send an executive order setting up a task force to kind of look at issues related to pets. So that was yesterday. I did a similar bill signing in Delaware with Governor Markell on Thursday. That week, I also helped set in Nancy Perry has a legislation class that she teaches out of her ASPCA offices in D.C. Through Lewis and Clark and the Center for Animal Legal Studies. That was most of last week. Monday, I helped film a special for PBS with Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett at the Lincoln Center. And yeah, it's just been kind of a lot of different things going on at once.
That is a shitload of
And
balls in the air.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, it's a lot of stuff. And in the last couple of weeks, I also officiated my first ever wedding, and yeah, had a birthday. So it's been pretty. And we did strategic planning for ALDF down in D.C. I work for a group called the Animal Legal Defense Fund. So that was really positive. We got a great group of folks and some new board members, and it was good to throw some new ideas out there and see the great response we got back. And yeah, so it's a lot going on, a lot of travel. I haven't been to my home. I've got two homes, one in California, one in Illinois, and I've been to neither of them in the last month or so.
Well,
yeah.
and you're doing the ALDF is doing some work here in Utah
On
with
Thursday, I
the
think.
Ag-Gag Laws, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. I think there's
I came on about 14 or 15 months ago. ALDF decided they wanted to get a bit more active with their legislation and things legislatively. About 4 or 5 years ago, they brought in Carter Dillard to set up an in-house litigation program, and that's been just a phenomenal success. And that's who filed the suit against the Ag-Gag Law in Utah. And they kind of saw that worked so well, they wanted to do the same thing with legislatively. So they brought me in, and I'd been doing animal law on the side, doing fine arts and film related things for the previous decade or so. And yeah, circumstances changed in my life. I was helping care for my grandmother, and she passed away at age 97. And some of the things kind of got to a point with my business where I could kind of not have to be as hands-on. And so, yeah, the timing just worked out perfectly, and it was sort of an ideal sort of dream job for me. And yeah, it seems to have worked out really well. And I finally just this last week hired my first other person. So I went from being a department of 1 to a department of 2, which is a massive leap, 100% increase there. So a psychological safety net of 2 months ago, or a couple weeks ago, I was trying to take my first day off in 2 months, and something exploded, and I sent my last email out like 9:30 that night. So it's very nice to have a bit of a safety net now. Her name is Carney-Ann Nasser. She was working with Elsie Wenders at PETA, and she's phenomenal. Great. So it's really excited to have her on board.
So what got you working so heavily with animal issues?
I think what spurred initial interest, I currently manage with all my free time. I currently manage a farm that's been in my family for about 177 years here in Illinois. And at a very young age, we'd go there for family dinners when my great grandparents lived there. And, we had tons of different animals there. There were, pigs and dairy cattle and sheep and some beef cattle, goats and things. And just seeing these bright, funny creatures, as I was a bright, funny creature myself, really young age, 5 and 6, and especially the piglets. The piglets, especially, they're the ones who were so just energetic and just such a variety of personalities among them, and just funny, just cute and funny, and just kind of even at a very early age, kind of realized they had a sort of value to them that went beyond simply the weight of their flesh, which is how they're typically evaluated. Yeah, that kind of spurred it early on. And then, my mom has leanings. She and her best friend started a no-kill shelter a while back, and I was always bringing home strays. And then we lived in England for a while, and I really got into all the James Herriot films, and of course the early stuff, Lassie and Flipper and stuff. But yeah, the James Herriot veterinarian series in England, I really got into, and so I'd always wanted to be a vet. And then my high school guidance counselor, once he moved back to the States, talked me out of it, saying I'd never be able to get good enough grades to get into vet school. Yeah, I see her selling macrame at the county fair. I'm like, way to crush a kid's dreams, But it actually worked out for the better. And so I kind of studied biology and went through that and ended up creating the environmental science degree program at the University of Illinois back in like 1990. And that's initially why I went to law school. But I just found the practice of environmental law for my personality type wasn't as immediate. Like arguing parts per billion in some administrative law court in the bowels of Washington, D.C. didn't really seem to me to be addressing larger issues. So then I took a break. I did my first year of law school. I was like, jumped back into doing music business stuff. So I was pretty much on the road as a tour manager for about a good 6 or 7 years. And then the dean of students and so in the meantime, I've kind of decided I still want to be a veterinarian, and the vet school at U of I held a spot. So, okay, yeah, great. You got all the prereqs. We'll give you a spot. No problem. And then the dean of students at Harvard called back, and she's like, hey, dude, it's been 6 years. The administrative board's changing. If you want to come back, they've been really cool about you staying out. Because I was doing cool things. I was a stage manager for Lollapalooza and just traveling all over and just really learning a lot. But she said, this could be your window closing. It's like, well, screw it. I don't think I want to come back to law school. I think I'm going to go to vet school. And she's like, oh, funny you say that, because we've got this guy, Stephen Wise, coming to teach us this animal rights law course for the first time. And Harvard's the definition of old school, so it's surprising they would be kind of doing something progressive like that.
Yeah,
sort of like front page news. And Harvard's only like the 9th school, I think, at the time to teach an animal law course. So I'm like, that sounds cool. I kind of looked him up and like, wow, that seems great. So the vet school's like, yeah, sure, you'd be stupid not to finish off law school. We'll hold the spot for you. And so I went back in '99 and took the class with Steve, and yeah, it's kind of like this seemed to be exactly everything I was interested in doing. But I still kind of did it on the side. I was still doing like the entertainment industry stuff as my main income and doing the animal law stuff on the side. And I kind of liked that. I kind of liked the idea of kind of keeping your passion pure and not being kind of, the field was so new. It wasn't like there was this plethora of animal law jobs lying around at the time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of liked the idea of David Wolfson started that model where he works for a big investment firm, Milbank Tweed, and yet still does a ton of incredible animal law work. But yeah, just as it got, running my own businesses and stuff, you kind of take all of your time. And I found that the animal law stuff, even though it was my primary passion, just kept getting the table scraps of my time here and there. And so I would teach around a lot and lecture at friends' classes and speak at conferences and things and do some writing here and there. But, I wasn't really doing it to the degree that I wanted to. And then, I went down to a conference in New Orleans and kind of came back, was doing some soul searching, and I went to ALDF's website to see what other conferences were coming up. And just crazy happenstance, they happened to, which I should buy a gift for Ian Elwood, our communications guy, but he, though on the website, they had events and opportunities just happened to be bundled on the same little button. And so in looking for these events, this thing, opportunities popped up, says job listings. Job listings. The field had always been so tiny that things would just evaporate by word of mouth almost immediately because, Lewis and Clark are churning out so many students and everything. And the very first listing, I just kind of clicked on it for shits and giggles. And the first thing listed was this job. And it read like something I would, if someone sat me in a room and said, draft your dream job, this job description was it. And just everything kind of worked out. So it's great. It's just incredibly rewarding just to be doing this stuff day in, day out with the vast majority of my time. It's I couldn't be happier.
So for people that aren't familiar with ALDF, can you kind of describe what they do?
Yeah. So ALDF started in the 70s, and we've got about 100,000 members, and we're the only group. There's several other animal advocacy groups out there, obviously, but we're the only one that's focused exclusively on working through the legal system. So our motto is to protect the lives and advance the interests of animals through the legal system. And so we have several major kind of departments. We call them programs. One, as I mentioned, is Carter Dillard's litigation program, and they go out and specifically try to pick fights that will have a sort of larger impact. So look for situations like, say, the Utah Ag-Gag case is a classic example. Mm-hmm. Where if they win that, or the Utah or the Idaho suit, then it's going to be a huge setback, and will hopefully prevent any other states from trying to introduce similar bills, and may then have a larger effect in going back and overturning some of the other existing laws, Ag-Gag laws out there. Then we have another group run by Scott Heiser, and they're based in Portland. It's called the Criminal Justice Program, and they have several former prosecutors who look at more of the enforcement side of things. And so they will offer assistance, both financial and resource wise, and time, if to local appointed and elected prosecutors who may catch a case and either not be equipped with what they need, or may have not handled these cases before, or in some instances may just not be interested in pursuing it to the degree that they should. And so there's a variety of carrots and sticks that Scott and his team have in their bag to kind of help out with that. And that's a really great welcome thing for a lot of these prosecutors, because they want to do something, they just don't know how. So that's a really great resource for us. And then there's have another one called the Animal Law Program, and they handle all of the student animal legal defense fund groups. And so, like I said, back in 2000 when I took the course, only 9 schools had done it, and there was a handful of these SOLDEF groups. Now I think there's only 196 separate law school chapters of kind of adjunct chapters of ALDF. So that's great. And Pam's team also manages a pro bono network of attorneys that will do work on our behalf, mainly for Carter's team. I think we've got about 1,500 people, attorneys, in our pro bono database as well. And then we have a communications department and obviously a development department as well. But that's sort of the main thrust. And as I mentioned, I came on to do legislative work. So that's a mix of offense and defense. Obviously with the defense side is, things like the Ag-Gag bills for sure. There was a similar bill in Arizona that would have taken livestock out of the cruelty code and just put them in their separate, create a whole separate little thing for them, and just really reduce the protections. Also, I spent a month of my life this year in balmy Baton Rouge, Louisiana, working on a bill. There's a tiger that's kept in a truck stop cage there in a gas station parking lot.
What? Wow.
Yeah. The Tiger truck stop, it's 15 miles west of Baton Rouge, which is where LSU is, LSU Tigers. So they have, it's kind of a gimmick for people to come gamble and buy gas. And one of the reasons, so ALDF had fought that, Carter's team had fought that for about 3 years, and won at every level. Unanimous decision. One at the trial level, unanimous decision by the Louisiana Court of Appeals. Louisiana Supreme Court decided to let that stand. And so then, so this guy then gets his first term state senator to introduce a bill to exempt only himself from the law. The law banning that bans the ownership of big cats. Mm-hmm. So, so literally I thought I was leaving the house for a conference in Atlanta, this prosecuting animal cruelty conference. So I left the house thinking I was leaving for 4 days, and it ended up being 4 weeks. Like, I'll just stop through Baton Rouge on my way back. And 3 weeks later, I was still there.
Wow.
And so it's interesting. It's kind of, it's fun. It's fun to be on the sneaky side for a change. So we had all sorts of little tricks we were pulling to try and kill this legislation. And they held this hearing. They announced it, I think at about 6 p.m. the day before, that the hearing was 9:30 the next morning, the initial hearing. So, of course, no one could make it there to oppose this. And even then, it still only passed out by one vote. Then it failed to pass the first time on the Senate floor. Second time, we hired a great lobbyist Ryan Haney, and we kind of went to town, and Julia Bro from the Humane Society of the United States helped out a bunch. And we had enough votes, and one of our friendlies got confused and just voted the wrong way. And so, again, it passed out by one vote of the Senate. So then it kind of picked up some momentum. So the thing was, we got the Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries to say, look, no way, this is totally violates the spirit of law. And the first lawsuits against this guy were joined. One of the lead plaintiffs was Warren Trish, a former representative who had authored the 2006 law banning big cat ownership. So even he's like, look, this is goes against the grain of everything I wanted to accomplish by passing this law. And so they initially tried to do a much broader exemption, and we got the LDWF to come in and said, no effing way, you got to limit this or we'll kill it. So then the sponsors was great because they then started falling all over themselves in the hearings. Like, oh, no. It only applies to this one tiger. It only applies to this one owner. We even had other tiger owners come out of the woodwork and beg us to be part of this legislation. And we said, no, we were only familiar with this facility. It's just limited to this. So we're kind of like, okay, you sure that camera's rolling? Make sure this is all going to the record. Because evidently unbeknownst to them, there's a provision in the Louisiana Constitution that just outright prohibits passing what's called a special law that confers any right, privilege, or immunity on any one person, association, or corporation. So blatantly unconstitutional. But it's just a funny little dance to know this and have to keep your mouth shut about it, because if you were to say anything, you'd tip them off and then they would correct it. So just this whole time, it's like, keep talking, jackass. It's like, okay. And having to act really bummed out at each stage when we lose. And yeah, and so then once it went to the governor's office, that's when we pulled out the big guns, and we had several leading conservatives and that's the great thing about animal issues. I found with the environmental realm that people would either, they wouldn't even really look at the issue. If something popped up, it's like, oh, I'm a liberal versus conservative. It's an environmental issue. I'm just going to pigeonhole it this way or that way. Where animal stuff is, Judge Posner puts it interesting. He says that animal issues tend to transcend any partisan political valence. Meaning that, my way of putting that into shorthand is that, skinheads love their dogs just as much as hippies. So it kind of really has much more to do with your own sort of personal ethics and upbringing than it does any sort of larger political affiliation. So there's a lot of great leading conservatives out there who are really pro-animal. So, Rich Lowry from the National Review, Matthew Scully came out early and kind of helped break that mold. Mary Madeline as well. So we had several folks kind of reach out to Jindal and say, hey, look, dude, you've got these political aspirations nationally. Last thing you want to be doing is signing an unconstitutional law. And it was kind of silly because all he had to do was pretty much do nothing and it would become law anyway. So kind of thought that's what he'd do. And he ended up actually signing the thing. So, which shows that he's probably unlikely to do very well in national politics when he's got this perfect out and he can kind of claim clean hands and please his constituency, and he ends up betting everything on black instead. So yeah, the stupid thing passed. He signed it on a Friday and we filed suit on Tuesday saying blatantly unconstitutional. So we'll see. We likely to prevail, but just sucks for Tony that he has to still sit on his ass in this cage in the Louisiana humidity for another while we litigate it through. And we had a guy named Pat Craig who runs a facility called the Wild Animal Sanctuary in Colorado. They're the largest and oldest exotic animal sanctuary in the Western Hemisphere. He's been doing this for 35 years, and he came out and testified at the hearing. And turns out the guy who owns a truck stop, his dad owned a similar truck stop in El Paso, years before. That literally they would have the tigers kind of out by the gas. There's pictures from the 70s. These tigers at the gas pumps, just kind of chained up and people around them and shit.
Jesus.
I know, it's insane. So anyway, when that place shut down, the place in Colorado got all of that. They got all of those tigers, and so they have all these because one of the lines that they were giving for the truck stop thing is he's got a 3,200 square foot cage. I bet you there's most people in this legislature don't even have 3,200 square foot houses themselves. He's got it great. Well, A, you get to leave your house. 2, B, getting from one side to the other of your house isn't, 2 strides, which it is for a tiger. But in contrast, in Colorado, they've got these, it's a 700-acre facility. They've got each enclosure is 20 acres with little like ponds and stuff like that. And they're kind of in these social groups. So a bit of a no-brainer. But yeah, it just sucks that we found this great out. And poor Tony has to sit there, panting in the hot Louisiana heat for another while we sort it out in the courts. But yeah,
so
that's sort of,
I was just going to say, you were saying that animal issues seem to be pretty bipartisan. Do you feel like organizations like ALEC are changing that and making it trying to be more business related?
that's interesting because the one area where that falls short is when it comes down to sort of financial issues, and I guess at some level most of the animal issues could be kind of derived down to that. But certainly with agriculture, ALEC for sure, and also on some of the civil damages issues where people being compensated for harming or killing someone's pet. That's the area where I spent most of my kind of academic research over the last decade, was on that particular issue, specifically the intersection of veterinary malpractice with the companion animal evaluation issue. And there you definitely see conservative groups involved, especially the pharmaceutical industry, doing everything they can because they want to have it both ways. They're profiting like crazy. I mean, pet pharmaceuticals is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But the same thing with veterinarians. I mean, close to $30 billion being spent by Americans just on vet care alone, all due to the amount of the feelings that people have for the companion animals and wanting to keep them alive. And the vet industry and pharmaceutical industry are profiting handsomely from that. I mean, you just see like every decade their revenues almost double. But yet when they make a mistake and kill your animal, they just want to claim, oh, sorry, market value. Here's your $50 to go buy another dog. They want to have it both ways. So yeah, those are the two areas where it does become a bit more partisan. But it's just cool to see that they haven't been that successful. And people always talk about the influence of finances in politics and money in politics. And yeah, of course, that's obviously a very real factor, Koch brothers and everything. But, money's only effective in politics to the extent that it buys you votes, or that it gets you votes. I mean, it still comes down to actual votes. And as you saw with, Crossroads, that, all this money was raised by these big conservative groups and thrown around in the last election, and they had like something like a 3% success rate. So it's they're involved, but I've just been really impressed by how unsuccessful a lot of these ag attempts have been. And I just, again, because I think it just so goes against the grain of what the general populace feels. I mean, so many polls out there, the vast majority of Americans, in like 80s and 90%, support increased animal protection and reducing animal cruelty. And even in Arizona, on this livestock bill I mentioned, 87% of Arizona voters oppose the idea of taking livestock out of the existing cruelty code. And no matter how you subslice that, rural versus urban, Republican, Democrat, age, gender, income, the smallest subgroup that opposed taking livestock out of the cruelty code was 80%. So that's pretty amazing. So, when you're going to these legislators, even though Alex introduced this bill and throwing money around, it's like, just so you know, what you're about to do is going to go against the wishes of, 82% of the voters in your own district. So those are pretty big numbers. And so, some money here and there that may help you, or, pleasing Alec, which may help you in a kind of a hierarchical sense, kind of theoretically, versus you may not get voted back in next year. I think that's a kind of a sharp contrast.
Do you feel that animal issues do lead to voting, or they might be opposed, but that might not be their deciding factor on who they vote for?
That's an interesting question. I don't know how easy it would be to calculate that, but I do know that those in kind of power believe so. For example, this very Tuesday in Missouri, they've got this Amendment 1, which is a ballot initiative put forth by the ag industry and the puppy mill industry, that is one of these so-called right to farm bills that would basically put into the Constitution that essentially the state can't dictate anything to agriculture, and that nothing can prevent them from using the latest scientific methods available to raise animals, aka gestation crates and things like that. And so initially this ballot initiative was scheduled to be put on the ballot in the general election, and the Democratic governor of Missouri was so concerned that it may really bring out a lot of conservatives that he moved and had it put on the primary ballot instead, so that just in case it drew a lot of conservatives, it would still only affect the primary race and wouldn't bring them out and kind of get more ancillary votes for Republicans in the general election. So I thought that was very interesting that you've got this animal-related issue, and the governor himself is so concerned that it will pull out voters that he moved it to the primary. So, but yeah, it's a very good question. I think on ballot initiatives, that's certainly the case. They really have brought people out. I mean, the Prop 2 in California passed by the largest margin of any ballot initiative in the history of California. So it certainly did draw people out, but it's hard to say. But I think it's just a matter of just mobilization. That's kind of what I feel my job is. Like, I don't really get mad when, say, something negative happens. I just feel it's my job to prevent that from happening again. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the film. There's a film called So Goes the Nation that was made about the 2004 presidential election, and it focused on Ohio.
Sure.
And so there's some younger Democrat folks who kind of thought there must have been some shenanigans. Like, you figure after Katrina and Gulf War and all this crazy crap that Bush pulled in his first term, like, how on earth could he actually get reelected? And so it all came down to Ohio. And so they went in there basically looking for shenanigans, looking to see kind of what was done to kind of throw the fight. And they came away from it saying, actually, you know what? We just got outworked. The Republican political machine in Ohio just really did a tons of grassroots work, really brought out a lot of the evangelicals and other conservatives, and just did a better job. And so the goal here is not to sour grapes. The goal is to just go and work harder and more effectively and smarter. And so that's kind of the way I feel. It's like you've got, let's say, these polls showing 90% of Americans favoring increased animal protection. And so those are huge numbers. It's sort of my job to galvanize and mobilize that public sentiment into concrete legislative action.
So you mentioned that California bill that had recently passed. Do you know what point that's at now? I know that it took some time before they could weed all the places out and.
Are you talking about Prop 2?
Yeah.
Yeah, that passed, I think, in 2000. Oh, what year was that? Was it 2008? I'm slipping. Sorry,
a little while ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, right. And so there was definitely phase-ins, and some of those phase-ins are getting close, which is why these challenges are popping up. Mm-hmm. So Steve King this year or last year got an amendment inserted into the Farm Bill that would have limited things like Prop 2 only to California itself. What the King Amendment would have done is basically said, any state can pass their own health, safety, and welfare regulations, but they can only apply it to in-state producers. So, say for example, in California, for example, if you ban battery cages, keeping hens in battery cages, if this King Amendment had stayed in the Farm Bill, it would have said, okay, well, that can only be applied to California egg producers. You can't apply that same standard to egg producers in Iowa. Especially the egg producers that happen to be in Steve King's home district. And it's just such a hypocrisy because he's this Tea Party darling who's like screaming, states' rights at every turn when it comes to, gay marriage or, women's access to reproductive health care, gun control. It's all states' rights. How dare the federal government tell us what to do? And then when you have, the egg producer in his home district being affected, he's like, we can't let these states make up their own rules. We need the federal government to step in and tell everyone what they can do. It's just such hypocrisy. And he's sort of a clown anyway. I mean, he's like regularly skewered on, Colbert Report and Daily Show. But Yeah, so right now, so that failed. Luckily, that got stripped out of the farm bill. But the Missouri Attorney General has an ongoing lawsuit trying to essentially do the same thing, trying to prevent California's Prop 2 from being applied to out-of-state producers. And it's funny because California is the largest market, and so everyone wants access to California's market. So it's no one really seriously. I mean, it still has to take it very seriously, but it's sort of unlikely to pass muster. I mean, it's been declared many other times when it comes to like environmental regulations or other things that states have the ability to kind of set their own standards. And so, if you want to sell a car in California, it has to meet heightened standards for fuel efficiency and things like that. So yeah, it's still being challenged, but it's the phase-ins are starting to kick in pretty soon.
So to switch things up a little bit, we recently had an incident here in Utah where a police officer shot a dog named Geist, and there's a large campaign for that called Justice for Geist. Obviously, it's not a rare occurrence, but you've done some work producing Puppycide. Is that correct?
Yeah. So as I kind of mentioned in my sort of prior life, I've been doing film and fine arts work. So I produced the Kurt Cobain documentary that he narrated, another film called Beautiful Losers about all these visual artists who came up through the skateboard and graffiti scene, and another film, Favela Rising, that got shortlisted for an Academy Award. And so my roommate, actually, we have a pit bull at my house in Illinois, 13-year-old named Poppy. And he came across this Kickstarter campaign for these guys and pointed out to me, and I noticed that they asked for a kind of a large amount, and they'd raised like I think $60,000 in donations, but Kickstarter sort of an all or nothing thing. So they didn't get to their ultimate goal, so that $60,000 just evaporated. And I had some money left over my budget, and I was thinking, wow, this is something I wanted to get more involved in as far as my department. And we have one of the people in the criminal justice program at ALDF, Diane Balkin. She's in Colorado, and she was quite heavily involved in a piece of legislation that passed last year. They called the Dog Protection Act, and it's just a great piece of legislation that says we recognize the value of people's companion animals, and dogs, and that it sets up a mandatory training for police officers in sort of animal encounters, what you can do, and kind of force continuums to try non-lethal methods first. And you see that training, it all does really come down to training. We had at our ALDF's conference at Stanford in October, we had a panel on this very subject, and there is a guy named Scott Sargent, who's a captain with the LAPD, and he oversees, reviews each use of force, and they've got great training. So you've got, a massive metropolitan area the size of Los Angeles. They shoot about 20 dogs per year. Chicago, we've got a smaller metro area, and they've shot 494 in the last 5 years.
Holy crap.
I know. I mean, you do the math on that. That's like 2 a week.
Wow.
So 2 people's dogs getting shot by police every single week for the last 5 years. I mean, that's substantial. And so, and what's interesting, like I said, I've been kind of focused on companion animal evaluation through the civil courts as far as, through state law of like tort remedies for like emotional distress or loss of companionship. But what's interesting about these police shooting cases when it comes to compensating the victims is that it's actually a federal claim. It's a constitutional deprivation of property claim. So it's or unlawful seizure of one's property, and so it's called a 1983 claim. And so as a result, you kind of bypass state law that may have certain limitations. And so some of these judgments are huge. There's one in Maryland that we've involved with, that ALDF has written an amicus for, that I think was like $670,000 was awarded to this family. Yeah, and then they're also and so there was, even in Chicago, they had one was, they were saying, well, what's it going to cost them like this? Like, well, it's certainly probably going to be cheaper than the $338,000 you paid out to one family for just one of the shootings you guys have done in the last, 500 of the last 5 years. And you see, it's one of those things that just nobody wins. I mean, I studied a lot of kind of, it was called like law and economics, was kind of generally thought of as like the sort of conservative wing of legal thought. But I studied a lot and wrote about it a lot in this big article I wrote on a vet malpractice thing. And, the idea behind economic efficiency is just reducing unnecessary accidents that reduce the overall social wealth. And that's exactly what these police shootings fall into, because they're preventable and they end up causing unnecessary harm. In many ways, they cause obviously great tragedy to these families, the death of the animal, tragedy to the family, but also then the municipalities ends up getting their asses sued off. I mean, in San Jose, there's the Hells Angels, not exactly a sympathetic plaintiff, but yeah, the police went on these raids, this multi-spot raid, and shot a bunch of their dogs doing it on this raid, and dogs presented no threat whatsoever. Hells Angels got like $1.2 million from the city of San Jose. And there's tons of other situations where in Arizona, cop goes to shoot a dog, bullet ricochets, kills a 4-year-old child. So, it's kind of these like lose-lose situations. So if there's a way to prevent them cheaply and efficiently, everybody wins. So I've kind of wanted to make this a kind of centerpiece of what we do at ALDF, and this film came along as this perfect time. So yeah, they've changed the name. Puppycide was kind of viewed as a little bit incendiary, and so they're changing the name to, it's going to be called Of Dogs and Men. And typically what you hear whenever you bring this issue up with someone in law enforcement, often it's like, well, when I'm going into a drug den, I need to make sure that, yeah, that's maybe will be true. But the amount of calls that you're actually raiding some, gun-toting drug den with, 18 loose dogs attacking you is going to be pretty slim, few and far between. And so what's great about the film is that they focus on all different types of dogs. They have a bunch of small dogs, and in many instances, it's cases of mistaken identity where they got the address wrong on the search warrant. So they go in and there's this elderly woman whose dog they blew away. There's a case in there. There's a guy who accidentally left his wallet on his car, and it's like money was flying out. And so someone calls in like, "Hey, let this guy know." So the police pull him over. I mean, you think you're supposed to be doing this guy a favor, and he's on his hands and knees, with his hands behind his back, or behind his head, kneeling down behind his car. And they go to get in the car. He's like, "Wait, my dog's in there. Don't let my dog out." They open the door. Golden Retriever pops out. Boom. Cop blows it away. And what's interesting is that these guys have a ton of dash cam footage. So it's one thing to kind of talk about this stuff or think about it or hear about it theoretically, or even just hearing victim statements. But it's another thing when you're actually you see it happen, and you see these dogs they don't often die instantly, and it's just absolutely gut and heart wrenching and unnecessary. I mean, you kind of camera doesn't really lie. There's one of the shots they have in there. There's a dog, I think also assembling a golden retriever. It's lying. It's already been subdued at the end of a snare pole, right? So, you've got this 10 or 12 foot pole with a noose on the end. So it's completely immobilized. It's actually lying down, wagging its tail on the ground. And this cop walks up and just puts a gun to its head and just shoots the thing on camera.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, so it's that's what kind of got me most interested, is that it's just seeing the actual happen. I mean, there's pretty much no way you watch this footage and you can avoid coming to the conclusion this is absolutely horrific and something has to be done to prevent it. And I mean, there's a case in Maryland actually, just north of kind of considered Metro DC, where it was the actual mayor of the town. Someone had shipped some drugs to themselves, and it got misdelivered and put on his porch. Mm-hmm. And so the cops raid him. They take his elderly mother. She's hogtied on the couch, and he's in his underwear going comes down what the F's going on? And they see the cops blow his dog away in front of him. He's like, "I'm the mayor. I'm your boss. What the hell are you doing in my house? And why did mom tied up? And why'd you just shoot my dog?" I mean, so it's just a thing. If this can happen to a town mayor by his own police force, there's just nothing stopping it from happening to anybody. So, so Illinois passed another bill. They've got some, it wasn't as it was more of a recommendation and an outright mandate on the police training, but it's still having a great positive effect. Like Illinois State Police have jumped on board. There's a woman, Sherry Travis, who's doing those trainings. There's another woman, Leedy Van Cabbage, who does a lot of great training at the Police Training Institute down in University of Illinois. So yeah, it's just like a great issue, then that one that all of our kind of pistons can fire at once on. So, and ALDF has a lot of great credibility in that realm because we do so much work with prosecutors and law enforcement that I think we've got a kind of gives us a more unique voice rather than just some outside animal advocacy group telling police they're doing the wrong thing. We're saying, hey, look, we work with you guys all the time. We know this is giving you a black eye. And we can help you prevent this. So let's work together and kind of get some training in place.
How much do you think the militarization of our police force has caused an increase in these type of incidences?
I'm sure it definitely as a result, for sure. I mean, there's kind of I think there's kind of a mindset that happens when you part of that mentality of the militarization is you're kind of reducing individual decision points, I think. Mm-hmm. So there's a group all running into a building. Everyone's got this very hyper-specific task to do. And there's no kind of – I think it reduces a chance for sort of reflection and making kind of decisions on the spot that are a bit more measured. And that's what's so great to hear about L.A. I mean, they – so when Karen Snell described at the conference we had at Stanford, described all these cases she's won, like the Hells Angels case, Captain Sargent, which is I'm sure causes no end of confusion. Captain Sargent got up and talked about why that would never happen in Los Angeles, and he walked through the protocol. It's like if we're going on a multi-site raid like that. We're going to have a room this size of like at least, 100 people that are going to be involved in the briefings leading up to that. And so if you go on to serve a warrant and there's a dog present and you don't have a fire extinguisher with you, you're getting written up. Fire extinguishers turned out to be the absolutely most effective dog neutralizer because every single one of their senses gets completely overwhelmed. Their vision's gone. There's this cold sensation on their body. It's loud as hell, and it has an odor to it. So it's just like all of their senses just get completely overwhelmed. They just like stop dead in their tracks and then like take off running in the other direction. So something that simple can prevent this, or simply knocking and saying, "Hey, do you have a dog here? Do you want to go? We'll give you a minute if you want to go put the dog in the bathroom, before we come in." Things like that. And he actually showed video of some loose dogs and these officers using their cars to kind of corral them and to, try and trap them till animal control could come and get them rather than just summarily shooting them. So it's great to see that while, this militarization certainly probably is a factor, that even with that, it still comes down to you can still build in rationality and kind of decision making to that process, and knowing that there's consequences. I mean, that's the thing. Most people's, I don't care what you are, from a lawyer to a doctor to school teacher, administrator, legislator. Many people, their job is but one part of what they do. Their job is to kind of get through the day with as least hassle as possible and just get home to their kids. And so I think, cops aren't out to, necessarily out to go kill dogs. They just don't have the training to know how to do otherwise. And, they're left with a split-second decision and, they do the only thing that they've kind of been trained to do, which is just immediately remove the threat as quickly as possible. So I think it's just great to there are examples out there. It's not like we're deciding this in a vacuum. There's huge cities out there that have done this the right way, and we just need to export that model elsewhere.
Are they only really fighting it based on the financials of it, or do they actually say that they're trained well enough to be able to handle these situations?
Honestly, it hasn't really come up that much. I mean, that's the thing. It hasn't really been fought. I mean, usually kind of when there's a case filed, it kind of immediately goes out of the police department's hands and into the hands of the city attorney's office or someone like that. There hasn't really been that much follow through in trying to get training to happen. And so that's what's great. Like I said, this legislation in Colorado, I mean, this is all just last year that this all passed. And yeah, I think once, and again, in Los Angeles, it's the police department themselves that initiated this. LAPD were just like, look, we need to be ambassadors in community, and no one's going to respect us if we're out there, making enemies. And it's a huge financial liability for the city. Like I said, if, I mean, Chicago alone, one case, $338,000. You get this Maryland case, 600,000 plus. Hell's Angels, 1.2 million. I mean, a few of those, and that's especially in an era when everyone's budgets are getting slashed. I mean, it's I think everyone just views it as sort of it's one more thing they got to deal with and one more hassle. But it's just a matter of getting public sentiment and sort of the cooler heads at the head of some of these municipalities to realize that this is something that benefits everybody and will kind of drastically reduce their liability.
I know the case here with Geis, they offered a $10,000 settlement, which was rejected just because it wasn't addressing training. That's really what they want addressed. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And that's how most people are. And I think, if ALDF gets involved in more of these cases, which we might, I mean, it's saying, there's hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line, but the goal here, and that's the case with almost so many of the vet malpractice cases I've run across. It's not about the money at all, because no money's going to bring these people's animals back. They just want to make sure it doesn't happen to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's the main reason. And the exact same thing with these police shootings. They just want to make sure that some other family doesn't go through the grief that they've gone through.
So, getting back to the Ag-Gag laws, what kind of advice would you give to actual activists who are on the ground who have to, live with these laws while they're on the books?
Well, it's a tough one, because no matter how much they said that these laws are very specific and would never be, more broadly construed or applied, the only person ever arrested, it was right there in Utah.
Mm-hmm.
She was standing on a public thoroughfare. She was not even in violation of the law, and she still got arrested for it. So she was standing on a public thoroughfare by a slaughterhouse there, and she noticed that there was a cow they were using like a little mini forklift bobcat to kind of shove this cow along the ground to slaughter, which blatant violation of the law. And this woman, Amy Meyer, is just kind of standing there on the side of the road filming this, and this cop comes up and says, she's like, well, I'm not violating the law, I'm a public thoroughfare, and she was arrested anyway. And the charges were later dropped, but it just kind of shows you that it's really hard, and that's why these are so important, because all the major organizations out there that are doing investigations, are clear about never wanting to violate the law in doing so, because to do so would just discredit everything else that we're doing. So that's why it's so tough, because we want to make sure that everything is being done legally, and they sort of know that. And so it's very difficult to give advice on that, because who knows how broadly these things are going to be applied. I just would do everything one could to kind of prevent them from spreading elsewhere, and just really research the law well, and know if you're doing something, just try to comply, even if the law itself is something that's viewed as unjust. Still do everything you can to comply with that law. And that's, these are long tactics from the civil rights movement and other places where, you have a lot more credibility to your cause if what you're doing, can't be construed by the other people as painting you as some sort of, radical lawbreaker. It sucks, but that's and in my view, a lot of the ag industry, they're not so much worried about being caught doing what's illegal. I mean, you've got these huge cases like the Hallmark case in Colorado, where you have 143 million pounds of beef being recalled, the largest beef recall in U.S. history. And the story there was that, HSUS was in there filming for a week. They go to the USDA and it's like, oh my God, look at all these blatant violations we're capturing on tape. You need to go in there. And this is in addition to the USDA inspectors that are actually at the plant currently while it's being filmed. And USDA is like, we don't really see it. So HSU goes back in for another week. Goes back like, wow, look at all this additional footage, even more blatant violations of the law of sick and diseased cattle being like shoved into slaughter and put in the food system. Like, we don't see it. Third week, same thing. So they finally go to the media, and of course, leads to the largest beef recall in USDA. 37 million pounds of which was headed for the school lunch program. There's just another one in Petaluma, California, where This slaughterhouse was busted going and intentionally buying diseased cattle, like cutting off the cancerous parts, and whenever there's spot checks, swapping heads of cows from sick ones and healthy ones that's in those ones for inspection. And this is all while USDA inspectors are at the plant. In fact, one of the USDA inspectors was in a romantic relationship with one of the plant managers.
Oh,
so, fox guarding the hen house, there's some, I'm sure jokes can be made somewhere in there, but, it's so abhorrent what's going on there. And again, those are blatant law breaking. But I think what the industry is even more worried about isn't so much the blatant law breaking as, just the kind of the glass slaughterhouse argument that if the public were to see a lot of the things that are actually fully legal to do to treat animals in these facilities, there'd be this massive backlash. And so that's what they're, I think, most concerned about. But as far as advising individuals on the ground, I would say, it couldn't hurt to consult with a local attorney first before you engage in anything, just to make sure that you don't even accidentally run afoul of the law.
What's really funny about that case, I actually live pretty close to where that slaughterhouse is. Growing up, I used to always take people there and be like, look, this is really what happens. You can just watch it from the road right here.
Yep.
So like we was very well known, but ever since that happened, they put up like a 15 or 20 foot high fence.
Hay?
No, they put a metal fence up now. They first piled hay bales up right away. Now they put up a huge solid metal fence so you can't see anymore.
It's just, and of course the slaughterhouse itself is like partly owned by the mayor of the town, which I'm sure had nothing to do with getting arrested. But yeah, and it's a grand irony. Like I said, I manage a farm that's been in my family for 177 years, and so when I'm speaking at some of these hearings, I mean, they're saying, "Oh, you outside animal rights crazies coming in." It's like, look, we got a farm that's been in my family 75 years longer than Arizona's even being state. So don't tell me that I don't understand the needs and concerns of agriculture. And it's exactly this type of behavior that, when you've got these people blatantly breaking the law and, committing atrocious cruelty and jeopardizing public, health and safety of their, quality of their food, that gives everyone in agriculture a bad name. And we've got a duty to weed these people out. And so, when faced with, you've got, members of their community that are blatantly breaking the law and giving them a bad name, rather than trying to educate those people or weed them out, their job is to, like I said, just build bigger fences so no one can see them breaking the law, or try and pass laws to prevent people from letting them know that they're breaking the law. I mean, the analogy I use so for example, in the Idaho law that passed this year, which we filed suit against a couple weeks afterwards, there was a civil damages provision in there. Because they specifically, the Idaho Dairymen's Association specifically referenced the Weiss Brothers case in Wisconsin. They were a dairy that supplied Nestle for DiGiorno pizza, and there was an undercover investigation there that just showed just atrocious behavior happening, and just cows being just lifted up by chains that were just too weak or sick to walk, and stabbed to get them to move, just terrible things. Mm-hmm. And, as a result, Nestle's like, oh my God, and just dropped them as a supplier. And so here in Idaho, they mentioned that specifically, it's like they lost their entire market. So we want to put a provision in the Ag-Gag Laws saying that if someone loses business as a result of one of these investigations, that they should be able to get damages from the investigator if someone breaks the, and it's like, it's just insane to me that, these people didn't lose business because they were filming tape. They lost business because they were blatantly violating the law. It just so happened to be the investigator that documented that, but it's not the investigation that lost them their business. It was their own conduct, the illegal conduct. And so, to me, it's akin to having like a bar. I live in a college town, so these analogies come pretty quickly. You say you've got a bar that's serving underage minors, and someone tells the police about it, and the police raid them, and they lose their liquor license. That'd be like the bar owner being able to sue the person who told the police that they were breaking the law and get damages for all the lost revenue now that he's lost his liquor license. It's completely absurd to me.
Yeah, I don't even understand how someone can think that is like, doesn't make logical sense. Like,
well, I think the deal is that, kind of like very similar to the veterinarians. They've been this essentially, this industry that sort of been able to kind of make up their own rules for a very long time and kind of operate with almost complete impunity, and are don't really like being told what to do. And so I think they view these animal welfare laws and safety things as something that they are kind of voluntarily tolerating or something, rather than viewing that, no, this is the actual law that you have to comply with. So I really do think when their animals being harmed that they may not really even view it as a violation of the law. They view it as just something that's sort of business as usual. And when they get caught, they still kind of go back to that mindset. I think it's hard to understand, but it's interesting to see the folks that do react positively. I mean, and that's why too, one permutation of these laws that you've seen recently is the sort of quick reporting aspect, which came up first in New Hampshire this year, saying that if you see cruelty to livestock, you have to report it within 24 hours and turn over all your evidence. That didn't work. So in Arizona, they tried doing a 5-day, which is really smart. There's two smart things they're doing. It's stretching that out. The other thing they did in Arizona was attach it to an existing bill that would have added some anti-cruelty protections for companion animals, saying, okay, we'll give you a couple of protections for cats and dogs. We're going to add in these 10 things that are really terrible for livestock. Basically just testing the waters to see if animal advocates would be willing to throw livestock under the bus for a couple extra protections for cats and dogs. And thankfully, no one fell for it. Everyone stayed unified and opposed. But the thing with these quick reporting requirements, like I said, here you are in the Hallmark case where, week after week going back to USDA and they still won't take any action. It's not the investigators that are dragging these out. It's the actual, the agencies that are in charge with overseeing them and policing them. And so that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, because the argument is spun around and saying, well, it's an anti-cruelty issue. Like, well, yeah, if there's this cruelty occurring, we want to get it stopped as soon as possible. We want to know right away if someone's breaking the law at one of our facilities. And so the answer to that is, the reason is that they just want to basically fire the four or five guys that get caught on camera that are usually themselves making next to minimum wage and are kind of being treated very poorly themselves. Fire those poor schmucks and claim that they were these isolated bad actors and just replace them with others, and claim that they had no knowledge of it. And that's why you kind of need these investigations to go longer than 24 hours or even 5 days, is because you need that time to demonstrate that this was actual policy at that facility and part of a larger pattern of abuse that was at least tolerated, at most directed by management and ownership. I mean, in the Hallmark case, you've got 143 million pounds of beef being recalled. That's certainly not the action of a couple isolated individuals, And in my analogy too, is like, say you've got a drug trafficking network that the police are trying to take down, and you spend all this time to get a DA agent to infiltrate this drug operating ring. And if you required him to, report anytime he saw drugs being exchanged within 24 hours, like, he'd have to basically reveal himself and out himself at the first $5 drug buy, guaranteeing that you're never going to catch like a cartel head. If you just have to, each investigator has to out themselves the moment they see someone on the street selling drugs. So that's kind of the similar, this analogy there, what they're kind of trying to accomplish with these quick reporting laws. And it sounds like it's an anti-cruelty thing, but and even kind of rip off New York's kind of anti-terrorism subway thing of, if you see something, say something. What could be wrong with that? Well, the reality is, it's like, if you see something, say something, so we can immediately identify you, fire you, and make sure you don't see anything else, is what it essentially boils down to. And there's a group called the Animal Agriculture Alliance, which is the main proponent of these Ag-Gag bills, and they even said flat out that they were making these quick reporting type bills the centerpiece of their legislative strategy for 2014. And it's been great to see that, with Idaho being the one exception this year, again, we've shut down pretty much every bill, Ag-Gag bill. We were 13-0 last year, and we're about like 9-1 this year. We'll probably end up. So, it's just great to see that the public's not falling for it.
So how can people get in touch with you and the work that you do?
Yeah. So if generally about the organization, you go to our website, which is aldf.org, and that stands for the Animal Legal Defense Fund. That has a bunch of general information on everything we're doing, all the different programs and departments. You can contact me personally. My email is cgreen, CGREEN @ALDF.org. And I'd be happy to entertain any questions anyone has.
Awesome. Well, it's been a lot of fun. I love having these kind of conversations.
Yeah, I like how laid back it is. And, I'm obviously good at talking, so talk y'all's ear off. But it's something I'm very passionate about, and I appreciate you guys giving the a vehicle to have people find out information about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, have a great Sunday and get some relaxing in. It sounds like you need it.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Bye. Bye. This week you heard
Megan by Anesthesia.
And right now you're listening to
F Letter by Frodis.
And as always,
El Comandantes.
Which side are you on?
Is F Letter, does that stand for Frodis, or is that...
I have no idea what it stands for. You'd have to ask the band.
Why?
Because it's their song that they named F Letter. So maybe it just stands for the letter F. Maybe it stands for another word. Maybe it stands for an E and they just forgot to put the bottom line on.
E letter.
Yeah.
Like an email, E letter.
Uh-huh.
That's probably what it is. Or a fax letter.
Or, that makes even more sense, a fax letter.
Probably what it was.
Facsimile.
So we're still doing a giveaway with the protectmypooch.com sign. If you retweet or follow us on any of our social media stuff, we will enter you to win that sign.
But you can get extra entries by just tweeting it out, saying, hey, check out protectmypooch.com. We really, 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 really need you to rate and review us on iTunes. That's how many reallys we need you to do it.
It's simple. All you have to do is, on your iTunes account, just type in which side. If you're not already subscribed to us, totally subscribe to us if that's your thing. Rate us.
If you're on a public library and someone's already signed in, or a public computer,
Do a Go subscription.
just go subscription and rate us under their account.
Yeah, I'm sure they'll really appreciate it.
Then they get free awesome episodes.
You're giving them free content that will change their life.
Maybe.
Maybe.
But it's better than doing nothing.
It is.
Yeah.
You don't want to be an armchair activist, do you?
Fuck shit damn.
Fuck shit damn.
Which Side is produced by the Which Side Media Collective.